This is John Schwartzman ASC, the cinematographer on Jurassic World Dominion, and this is the Go Creative Show.
Hello and welcome to the Go Creative Show, a podcast for filmmakers. My name is Ben Consoli, and today we speak with John Schwartzman ASC, the director of photography of Jurassic World Dominion. John, welcome back to the show.
Thank you very much, Ben.
This episode of Go Creative Show is sponsored by Shot Lister, the best shot list creation app for production in the business. Email them at gocreativeshow@shotlister.com for your free gift. We are so happy to have you. The film is awesome. It's like totally taking over the world right now. Top Gun has been bumped from the top with Jurassic World. That must make you feel good. That's for sure.
What makes me feel good is that people are going to see both movies.
Exactly.
In addition to prepping a picture right now, I'm color timing at night, and I'm with Stefan Sonnenfeld at Company 3, who color timed both Maverick and Jurassic. So I said to him, what does it feel like to have $1 billion of worldwide gross, by next weekend? I said, you ought to feel good about that.
Exactly.
And I think he did. It's a very impressive thing to have the top two movies, in 2.5 consecutive weeks.
Oh my God. I'm just glad people are going back to the theater. That's fantastic.
Well, I will tell you, you sort of forget, Ben, we're in a world now where obviously we go with the ebbs and tides of COVID, and there are times when it seems like it's going away. I did a picture in the fall with John Lee Hancock, who I did The Highwaymen with, who I've done 8 pictures with. We were in Connecticut in the fall, and pretty much in that part of the Northeast, there was no COVID to speak of. We were actually able to film without wearing masks, right? For the first time in 2.5 years. By the end of the movie, Omicron had started to really rear its ugly head, and we went back to masking. I hadn't been to a movie theater, a real movie theater, until actually I went during the week, because I knew there'd be not as many people in the theater to see Maverick on a big screen. And then obviously the Jurassic World premiere at the Grumman's Chinese Theater, or the Chinese Theater, was the first time I had really sat and realized, oh my God, the experience of seeing Laura Dern in a close-up at 35 feet high is so different than on, I have a state-of-the-art OLED in my house, but it's still not the same experience. Maybe I've got very good color, and I've got a high dynamic range, and I've got good contrast. But what I don't have is scale. And you realize that I'm speaking for probably all cinematographers, when we go out and shoot, we're thinking about the big screen, and we're thinking about scale. Scale is a part of how you choose to frame and shoot a movie, right? And it was just really nice to go back to the theater. And because remember, when I started Jurassic, no one had heard of COVID, right? It was, and then it came on and hit us really quick, and we shut down. I think it was March 15th, and they flew me home the next day with Chris Pratt and the American actors, because at the time, no one knew if the borders were going to be closed, right? Yeah. So we all were flown from London back to LA literally within 24 hours. And then fortunately for us on this movie, we were the first movie back, and especially the first big movie back. We're talking about 800 or 900 people on the crew, if you talk about the model makers and the plasterers and the painters and everything else. And I will say that Pat Crowley, our producer, just did an incredible job of coming up with really the very first protocol on how a movie could go back to work. And we did that incredibly successfully. Not that it wasn't stressful, and we did have people testing positive from time to time, but we made it through that whole movie with no one actually getting sick. So that was a great testament to the producers, who were very aware of people's fears. But I think the moment you walked onto the set of Jurassic World, you probably felt like you were in the safest place you could possibly be, because you were with a group of people that knew how to sort of isolate, although not everyone, people did go home to their families, but they understood the importance of being able to make this work. And I think we all felt that the set was the safest place you could possibly be, because where else are people being tested either 3 or 5 times a week, right? So it was about as well done as you possibly could, especially given at that time, Ben, no one really understood COVID at all, except that a lot of people were dying. I mean, we were filming at a time in London when, 2,000 people a day were dying. And we were able to pull it off. And I think pull it off in a way that did not affect the movie at all. I mean, the only change we made was, rather than first unit going to Malta, which was we were going to go there, second unit was going to film there for a while, and then we were going to go and kind of plug in Chris and Bryce to just certain things for maybe 4 or 5 days. We decided to build that back at Pinewood because the thought of traveling 400 people to Malta seemed like it was very risky at that time. Yeah. And I think, every step of the way on this movie, and I give them incredible credit now, especially as a Monday morning quarterback, they did an incredible job. I cannot overstate really what, I can only imagine the responsibility that they felt, and they did it just, you couldn't ask for it. I wish the people that ran FEMA were as talented as these guys.
Yeah. We had Ben Cutchins on the show talking about White Lotus around the time of COVID. And he had, I guess it's benefit and misfortune of having to film throughout COVID. But the reason I say benefit is because they started it after COVID had already begun, and they were able to build a little bubble in order to shoot that series. And I'm curious, were you able to do something similar on your end to completely lock everybody in?
Well, we couldn't lock everybody in like they could. So he had 2 advantages. One, Hawaii, which at the time had very strict travel restrictions in, right? So you couldn't just go, I'm going to go to the Kahala Hilton and hang out on the beach. So they had that going for them. And then obviously they were at that resort on the North Shore. And they bought the whole thing out because obviously nothing's open, right? Yeah. So we did a similar thing with the cast, the director, and all of the hair, makeup, all the vanities that went with them. They rented out the Langley Hotel, which was about 5 minutes from Pinewood. So the other thing was, it meant we had no turnaround issues with the actors. At the time, I had a house in Notting Hill. My wife had gone back to the States and wasn't going to come out because of COVID. So I just lived in my house, and I felt that was incredibly safe for me. I didn't have anybody coming to clean. I took care of all that. And I had because I'm an American, the studio will not allow me to drive in England. So I had my driver, who was also in a bubble, go and do my shopping. So, obviously with the HODs, they did that as well as they could. But remember, I'm in England. I've got an English crew. Most of them were going home. That said, kids aren't in school and everybody's terrified. So they were making bubbles no matter what.
Yeah.
It was great. Look, by the time they did White Lotus, we had wrapped, right? So we were making it up as we went along, but to a high degree of sophistication. The choices were always made on behalf of safety. Because if you didn't and somebody got ill, number one, we were too high profile. And I think we all realized that we were going to be the tip of the sword to bring the industry back into production.
Yep.
And we did it.
Yep. Jurassic World Dominion is the 3rd and final of the Jurassic Park series. And you shot the first Jurassic World and now coming back for the 3rd. Was there something different on this film that you weren't able to do the first time? That just you were granted by more time, different budget, different technology? Was there anything that you wanted to do but couldn't and now can?
Actually, no. I mean, so remember, so of the 3, I didn't do the second one and Colin didn't do the second one because at the time we were prepping Star Wars, which ultimately did not happen for Colin. right? So the plan was Colin was going to write and sort of produce from afar, number 2, while we did Star Wars. And it was always his intention to do the third one. The Star Wars story, which everyone sort of knows or whatever, it just didn't happen. They weren't happy with the way his script was going, and he was replaced by JJ. But we shot the first one and the third one on film, both 65 millimeter and 35 millimeter. And that was partially on the first one because film was still, people were still using film. And also Colin felt like Jurassic Park movies are shot on film.
Yeah.
And me being a huge film guy, it was music to my ears, right? So we did the same thing on Dominion, right? We shot it on film. There's one sequence in the movie that's shot digitally, and that was only because Colin changed his mind about a light source in the scene in the caves and wanted to use just a flambeau, a flaming torch. And I said to him, I don't think I can use that as a source light for film, especially large format film, because you need more light for more depth of field. I said, can we shoot this on large format digital? And then Sam can hold that torch and that'll be the only light source in the scene. And I said, what we'll do is we'll take the digital material. Once it's cut, I'll color time it. Then we'll scan it back out to film and rescan it in so that it is film per se. And also we'll have a complete cut negative of the movie. So other than that, we shot 65, 4x 35, which is what we did on Jurassic World. And on this one, just out of sheer luck, at Pinewood Studios, and I cannot remember the name of the camera company that has a office there, they had 2 VistaVision Bocam cameras, which was a camera that ILM developed, and it's a very small VistaVision camera. And VistaVision is a medium format camera system that uses 35 millimeter film, but it runs sideways. It runs in the same direction that film runs through a still camera. So you get a lot of negative, and we utilize that a lot because it was right there. No one was using it because no one was working. So we also utilized Bocams because one of the things that happened after the pandemic, and one of our big discussions were, okay, we're going to come back. Do we continue shooting on film? Will the laboratory even be able to function?
Yeah. Can
they process 65 mil? The only place in the world that was processing 65 millimeter film was Photochem in Los Angeles. You've got a pandemic. Airplanes aren't flying. So we sort of thought, okay, well, we may not be able to shoot much more 65 when we get back to England post-pandemic because of just the infrastructure isn't there for us, right? The simple solution would have been to go full digital because then you can basically set up a lab anywhere, but we chose not to. The Kodak lab at Pinewood stayed open. And what happened was they could process 35 mil. So that's when we pulled out the VistaVision camera because it was still 35 millimeter film. The only difference was rather than running through the camera vertically, it ran through the camera horizontally. And that gave us a sort of a large format, or what you want to call medium format image on 35 millimeter film. And that was huge. And you see it on the ice lake and you see it in the underground market where most of that stuff is all shot VistaVision. The other nice thing about VistaVision is I don't lose as much depth of field at the same stop. So for the technical people out there, a 50 millimeter lens in 4x 35, the equivalent field of view is an 80 millimeter lens in 65. Now you've got a larger negative area, so therefore you have less depth of field. So to carry the same depth, you need 2 more stops of light in 65 millimeter. Now, if you're outside during the day, that's not an issue, right? Generally speaking, when cinematographers go outside during the day, they're putting neutral density filters in because there's so much light. In a set like the dinosaur market that had, I think, 1,600 park hands pounding down through the ceiling and 28 dino lights. And I mean, it was a huge lighting setup. The idea of being able to get 2 more stops of light was daunting. But then by having the VistaVision camera, I didn't really have to be as concerned. I was carrying a similar amount of depth.
That's interesting about the VistaVision, and I'll put a link to this in the show notes too, guys, so you can check it out as you're listening along. But I wasn't terribly familiar with it. I mean, I've heard of it, but I don't really know much about it. But that's interesting to hear that it pulls the negative sideways, thus giving you kind of the appearance, well, more than the appearance, the actuality of a wider frame.
Yeah, and it gives you basically this even more negative area than 65 does in a 2:1 format.
Yeah.
Just how the square fits into the square. Now, VistaVision came out of that 50s when everyone was when the studios were afraid that no one was going to go to the movies, they were going to watch TV. So everybody was fighting for these widescreen formats. CinemaScope, which we now call anamorphic.
Yeah.
There was Cinerama. VistaVision was another format, right, that allowed you to use 35 millimeter film, but it turned it on its side. The last time I had used the VistaVision camera was on the Rock for shooting plates. It became the go-to plate camera. There was a gentleman named Greg Beaumont, who worked at ILM, who realized I can build a small, lightweight camera that we can take out to the Tunisian desert to shoot plates for Star Wars. I don't have a photo, but anybody can look. 65 millimeter, the 65 millimeter lightweight camera, and it's literally called the lightweight camera, with a lens and a magazine weighs 90 pounds, right? Whereas the Bocam with a lens and a mag on it maybe weighs 25 pounds. So, the only thing about the Bocam is it's not silent. So it's a noisy camera. So you use it for the wide shots. You use it for the big moves through the dinosaur market where there's going to be a lot of sound effects. And, then you switch to your silent camera for all the tight close-ups. And that's kind of how we did it. If we knew we were doing something big and wide and we could get away with a noisy camera, we would use the Bocam, knowing that when we would go in for Bryce or Sam Neill or Laura or Jeff Goldblum or Chris Pratt, we would then switch to the other cameras for all the dialogue. And it was a clever, smart way to do it to maintain the maximum image quality, which is what we were always about, right? It's Jurassic. It's part of the Jurassic Park. We all pay homage to the first movie, and you can't forget that every time you're setting up the camera. And on this movie, we must have had more than 40 animatronic or puppeteered dinosaurs. So it wasn't as though you could forget it, because I had 8 guys under a table puppeteering these things, right? I mean, it was right there. It was like the cantina in Star Wars every day. It really put everybody on their A game. It's easier to kind of go, okay, so they're going to put that creature in later and not think about, okay, maybe it's okay. Don't worry about that light over there. It doesn't matter. When you've got these creatures in, you are really paying attention to how the light hits the silicone skin. And hey, you say to John Nolan, our creature effect, hey, can you put a little more slime on the back of their ears? It was a lot of work, versus going, oh, don't worry about that. ILM's going to put them in later.
Well, do you prefer to work with the puppets versus visual effects?
There's no question that it's a double-edged sword. You can move faster with visual effects. But what I can tell you is the actors prefer to have the puppets. The puppets also create shadows and things that are happy accidents. So there's no question I prefer working with the puppets, especially because all we're really there to do is make sure we can capture the best possible performance, right? So if Bryce or Campbell Scott reacts and it's a real thing with the frills flapping, it's more dynamic than if you're telling him to look at a laser pointer, and we realized that on the first movie where there was one scene, I can't remember what the dinosaur was, but the sort of modified T-Rex had killed all these dinosaurs, and they go up and there's one dying in the field, and Chris sort of says, well, he's not eating, he's hunting, right? And that was Stan Winston's guys with this 10-foot head, and they were puppeteering it. And it was amazing to see how the performances were just amplified because of that.
Yeah, just having it in the room, it makes such a difference to performances. And also, I imagine that it's helpful for you just to get a better sense of scale. I mean, I know you do it with visual effects, but to have the real thing there must be helpful when you're framing your shots and lighting and everything.
There's no question. It's really helpful for camera movement in particular. And also things happen. The guys who are puppeteering in the Giganotosaurus, which was 60 feet long, and it was enormous, right? They say, okay, it's going to do this, but maybe it doesn't quite do it exactly. And that creates a sense of reality, especially if the operator's handheld. So yeah, it was amazing. It was fantastic. I mean, it does take longer. Your things break or you tear a little bit of skin and they have to fix it, but that's the time that you're spending on the front end is time that they don't have to spend on the back end, so, but at the end of the day, everyone was always kind of in a state of complete amazement whenever we saw these things, right? I mean, it just was like, oh my God. And they looked amazing. They looked incredible.
Yeah, and you had mentioned earlier that all the films in the series, but especially this one, pays homage to the first. I mean, we have Laura Dern, Sam Neill is back. I mean, the gang is back together. The band's back together in Jurassic World Dominion. What was that experience like for you, for the crew?
Oh, it was amazing. I'm not going to tell you how old I was, but I was certainly, in late teens, early 20s when Jurassic Park came out. So to get to, first of all, I've worked with Laura before, and I know Laura. I love Laura. She's an amazing actress and just a great person. So just to get to work with her again, it's always a privilege. I have never met Sam or Jeff, but boy, it was just great. I mean, it was one of those things like, all I could imagine is if we were doing this and there wasn't COVID, so the one thing we could not do was you couldn't go, hey guys, come to the camera truck at Wrap and we'll all have a glass of wine, right?
Yeah.
There was no fraternizing, right? But there were certainly days when you wished you could have all just sat around for an hour after Wrap and said, let's all have a glass of wine and just cherish the moment that we just had today with this and think about how exciting it was and how complicated. That was the one downside. The biggest downside was the sort of the ability not to be able to sort of, have that sense of fraternity and camaraderie, but to get to work with them was amazing. And they were all in this bubble at the Langley Hotel. So, what did they do at night? They all played the piano and sang. And so by the time they would show up on set every Monday, they had spent the whole weekend rehearsing. So ironically, the pandemic did not add any time to our movie. We did add a couple of days, but that was because a couple of key people who we couldn't shoot without, tested false positive. But in England, there were no false positives. If you tested positive on a Monday, you were out for 10 days, whether you tested negative for the next 8 days, right? Mm-hmm. You could not test out. Now you can, right? Now we realize there are false positive tests. I mean, in today's world in Hollywood, if you test positive and you're asymptomatic, you can go back to work in 5 days, right? Yeah. Because we know how to treat the disease. We have Paxlovid. People have to be vaxxed and boosted. So the fear of, oh my God, we may have somebody go to the hospital and die that's become something that really doesn't exist anymore. But obviously back then we were very cautious, and it was just amazing. It was great. I mean, just to the rapport between Sam and Jeff was hysterical,
Yeah, and you had mentioned that you didn't have the fraternizing like you would have had there been no COVID. And I find that interesting because your director had been interviewed and was asked about the most memorable day of the entire project. And he had said that it was the moment where you were all crammed into a helicopter together. It was kind of like the last time the whole gang was together. I think it might have even been on your last day. I was curious, that sounds like a great memorable day, but it made me curious what your most memorable day was, if not the same.
That was certainly one of them. I had a lot of them, but you have to understand, Ben, Colin remembers that day, and I remember it starting to rain and thinking, oh my God. And we were on a part of the set where I could not get a big scrim over the top. So Colin is reveling with the actors and I'm saying, we've got to shoot. If the skies are going to open up. So the best way to describe the job of a cinematographer, especially on a very, very complicated, expensive movie, is you're a relief pitcher, you're a closer, but you're asked to pitch for 9 innings, right?
That's a great analogy, yes.
But you're not asked to just come in and pitch the 3 batters and expect it to get out of the inning in 14 pitches. It's like asking Mariano Rivera to come in and pitch for 9 innings. And it's that way every day. So Colin may be at the monitor and having a great time. I'm standing out there looking at the clouds coming from the north going, okay, Colin, we've got to move. We got to get going because we're going to be in trouble in an hour, right? And the one thing is the sort of, on a big movie, you've got so many moving parts that it's very hard to change a shoot day, right? You're like an aircraft carrier. You can go, but you don't turn quickly. When you're on a very small movie, when I do movies with John Lee Hancock, if we get a weather report for the next day that's not good for what we wanted, we're going to be outside and, we don't want to shoot the funeral scene in the rain. Those movies are so contained that you can go, hey, we're going to go into the high school tomorrow. This movie, you can't do that, right? No. So there is an expectation that no matter what the conditions are, that I can make sure that we can film that day. And sometimes that's a very tall order, and that can be very stressful, but that comes with the job. That's part of being the relief pitcher, and it does. So there, I don't have as many times to sit back and go, I do. Don't get me wrong. When we wrap and I go, oh, that was fantastic. Certainly in the moment when I see shots and the camera move and I just go to Colin, that is bitchin'. We nailed it, But I don't get as much time to sort of enjoy those little moments as he does. But I certainly remember doing a scene in the cockpit of the plane, and we're all crammed in there. And it's right after we've come back from COVID. So are we allowed to do this? But again, we're all tested. The doors of the stage are open. There are fans blowing. It's windy because we needed some wind and also to make it safe. And I just turned to Colin, and he was in the back of the fuselage, which is a little monitor. And I said, man, we're making a movie again, and we're making it just like we used to. We're not in spacesuits. I said, this is great. I know we're going to be able to get through this.
Let's take a quick break and talk about ShotLister. We've got the founder here, Zach Lipovsky, who's also a filmmaker and knows a little bit about production and filmmaking, that's for sure. So ShotLister is obviously a shot list creation app for production, but it does so much more. And I wanted to give you an opportunity now to tell us about one of the things that you love so much. What is one of the many things that our audience should know about ShotLister?
Sure. Like you said, it can build shot lists, and, that's something that Excel can do and people have been doing for hundreds of years, is build a shot list. But what it really can do that kind of is a game changer is take those shots and put them into a schedule. And that really starts to open up some amazing things where it allows you to realize, we need to do this shot before this one because we're going to need time to change the camera over. And basically allows you to go through a lot of the thinking way before you get to set, which can be really helpful.
Lining up and organizing all of your shots and allocating certain amounts of time per shot is just such a game changer. And it makes you look so pro on set.
Yeah.
That's
definitely.
The name of the game.
And it's really helpful for talking with your crew. You can show your estimates to your DP and he'll go, oh no, this is going to take an hour, not 15 minutes. And you go, okay, well, that's good to know. While you're doing that, I'll be doing this. And it just sort of really helps communication that way.
So ShotLister's mobile apps are free, so you can start using ShotLister right now, wherever you are. But there's also a macOS version and a subscription-based ShotLister Pro that you obviously have to pay for. But Go Creative Show listeners get one of them for free simply by just emailing gocreativeshow@shotlister.com and telling them which one you want. You can either say, I want the Mac OS version of ShotLister, or I want a year of ShotLister Pro. Whatever you want, whatever you ask for, you're going to get it for free by emailing them at gocreativeshow@shotlister.com. Talk about a deal. Thank you, Zach, for coming on.
Thank you.
One of the biggest differences between, Jurassic World, that you shot the first one and you shot this now new one, Dominion, is the dinosaurs are now out in the world. We now have dinosaurs among us. And because of that, you have a lot of action scenes and a lot of just shots in general with these dinosaurs now out in the city, running through the streets of Malta, going all over the place. So I'd love to hear from you what changed in your cinematography, or how did you approach things differently now having these giant, dinosaurs among us in the world?
Well, one of the things that was interesting was that you say that part of it was we gave cameras to people, because part of it is it looks like iPhone footage, it looks like dash cam footage. So on purpose. So there's a great shot of a little girl running around in a field. That's Colin's daughter, right? And he shot it on the iPhone. So part of it was for us to not do that stuff. And I mean, we obviously reviewed it, but I would say to the loader, hey, if you're going to go to Hyde Park tomorrow, do you mind just imagine, a Triceratops is going through, just see, and some of it was staged and some of it was just sort of found footage, and that's how, because at this point, I think in Colin's mind, this has been going on for a couple of years. I mean, it's a nuisance. Look, I live in Southern California. This is going to be the time of year when you're going to hear about mountain lions coming down into people's yards because they need water, right? So somebody will call and say, there's a mountain lion drinking out of my pool. Think of it like that, but times 10. So with respect to the exterior Malta stuff, that was all done by Patrick Loungeway, who's been my second unit director of photography on a lot of movies. And he was on Jurassic World and Jurassic World 2 and 3. He's actually done all three. So he knows what to do, and also we had a device on this movie called NCAM. So with an iPad Pro, which I'm plugging now, so hopefully Apple will give me the next one for free.
Before we even started the show, we were talking about iPad Pros.
Well,
you are a man of my heart. I'm also a big Apple aficionado.
Well, but the thing is, there's a couple of things. One, so there's a program I'm going to give a shout out to Nick Sadler called Artemis, which is essentially a viewfinder program that allows you to put the type of camera you're using in and pick your lens set, and then you can use your iPad as a viewfinder, which is easier than having a lens viewfinder for scouting because you're not carrying a box of lenses around. Plus, you can take a picture and it'll record your GPS location, time of day, direction you're looking. So it's a pretty incredible tool. With that, ILM built this program that would couple with that. So if I sat in Malta and I said, okay, this is the scene where this dinosaur, where the raptor's running through the square, I could pan the camera and the raptor would be animated in it.
Wow. And this is the NCAM that you're talking about?
Yeah. So when they were lining this stuff up, they would go, and if we weren't shooting film, but if we were shooting digital, ILM could have plugged that in to the monitor that the operator was working off of. That he could have and I think it was Jim Cameron that invented this technology on Avatar. And it's only gotten better and better and better as memory has gotten bigger and as computer chips have gotten faster. But we would sit there with David Vickery and I'd say, I think the dinosaur is going to be over there, right? And he'd go, no, a little more like this. And, because he had animated the whole sequence.
Yeah.
So it was a very, very, very handy tool. Now, it didn't mean we had to stick to it because he could also change the path. But it gave us a place to go. And for when we didn't have animatronic dinosaurs, which first unit pretty much only shot animatronic dinosaurs, it gave second unit a real advantage to your set, which is scale. Because I can remember on the first one, what we used was a giant cutout on a very long pool cleaning pole to approximate the height. right? And we had picked this beautiful lychee nut forest in Kauai for the scene where the gyro ball comes to a rest and gets bounced around, only to realize that the T-Rex, the modified T-Rex, wouldn't fit in there. It was too big, right? But we didn't want to lose the location. So we went to Tim Alexander and said, can you scale it down for this? And he's like, of course I can. So, you're trying to maintain as much reality as you can, but we weren't going to let that lychee nut forest go. Can you make them 4 feet shorter? No one will know.
One of those kind of almost looks like found footage kind of scenes, and perhaps this may not be the one of those moments, but is that scooter guy kill scene that has somehow taken on a life of its own in social media. People are obsessed with the scooter guy kill scene. First of all, what's your reaction to the whole world kind of becoming obsessed with the scooter guy now?
I think it's hysterical, and God knows there's enough scooter guys who have almost crashed into me on sidewalks. It's a shout out to watch where you're going, buddy.
Yes.
And I mean, again, but that's a complicated stunt. I believe that he was on a ratchet. I mean, that's not, that's Patrick Loungeway and Dan Bradley, who was our second unit director for the Malta portion, coming up with these beats that are just both, terrifying and hysterical at the same time. And I think that's where these movies have such a good balance. Just when you're about to go, like, I'm exhausted, somebody kind of cracks a joke.
I love that. Let's talk about a couple of specific scenes in the film that are really getting a lot of buzz on social media. And ever since the trailer, honestly, people have been loving some of these clips. The first one I want to talk about is where Claire is sort of just under the surface of the water, where the dinosaur's coming right up to the surface there. It's in the trailer. Everybody loves it. It's really beautifully shot. I'd love to hear from you the way that you achieve that.
Okay, so that was, again, I've been doing this for a long time, and I knew technically how to do it. So, first of all, that's at that location is called Black Park. It's right behind Pinewood Studios. Back before Pinewood was Pinewood, it used to be a big, what they call an estate. It was like a big farm, and it got converted and split up. So Black Park is still a park where people go. It's huge, and Star Wars shoots there, and we shot there. And it's very convenient. You can literally, there's a gate that you can walk out the back of Pinewood and be in Black Park. So
wow, that's so crazy.
We picked where we were going to be based on the sunlight travel. And then I knew that Colin wanted her to climb into this pond. So we excavated that. And, like in everything in Hollywood, we dug it out. We lined it with 3 mil plastic. We treated the water so it was safe, and we filled it up. And then I designed the length of the pond so that we could start with the camera on a techno crane, which is a telescoping crane arm. Essentially, it's an arm that can extend or retract. Mm-hmm. And it's got about 37 feet. The 50-foot crane has 37 feet of movement. So we designed where the base of the crane was going to go, knowing that we could get all the way over the water and 5 or 6 feet up the path and be able to go with Bryce as she crawled, then pull back over the water. And then when she went underwater, we would dip the camera down. And then when she came back up, we would come up with her all in one shot. Now, the only tricky thing is cameras, you can't put a camera in the water, right? Cameras in water that's no bueno. So Panavision makes a lens system that's kind of like what would be the right word? A periscope, right? It comes out straight, and then you can turn the end of it so that it's 90 degrees. So basically what you're now doing is pointing the camera straight down. The lens extends about 2.5 feet below the front of the camera. And then the end of the lens turns, so it's pointed straight again. Mm. And then Panavision, for lack of a better term, makes what's called a condom for it, that's made out of neoprene rubber with a glass filter that you can slip over it, so you can put that in the water. I'm sure people have seen commercials with Michael Phelps swimming where they go from above to below, and that's the device you use. So that's essentially how we did it. And Bryce, God love her, she is game for everything, right? The harder and the more physical it is, the more she wants to do it. She doesn't want anybody doing anything for her unless it's, they say to her, look, we can't have you jump off of one rooftop to the other because of insurance. She'll do everything. And I love that shot. I mean, look, it's a bit of a shout out to Apocalypse Now. But my only thing I would say is, and I know it's one of those things like, what? I almost think it's too cosmetically pretty. I mean, Bryce has the most incredible skin, and I've known her for a long time. I've known her since she was like 13 years old when I shot a movie for her father. So not that I don't take care of all of the actors, but when she's in front of the camera, I'm always going to make sure that there's not a shadow where I don't want it. And on that shot, when she comes up, I almost worry, God, does she look too pretty with those green eyes? But I do love the shot. I love her intensity. I mean, it's not just the camera. It's the camera and her doing a dance. And that's the part of cinematography that's so exciting. The moment you really notice the shot, you've taken yourself out of the movie for that 5 seconds. When it all comes together and you think about it afterward, you go, that was really cool. That means you've done something right. I can certainly make shots all day long with shafts of light coming through windows and silhouettes walking in the foreground where you go, that's really beautiful. But the moment you say that's really beautiful, you've suddenly lost the narrative, right? So you're trying to walk that line. Every cinematographer does that.
Does that bother you? Like when you're doing something giant like this, you have big celebrities, you want to make everybody look amazing. That's all good. But do you ever feel like you're kind of, there's a battle between what you want to do or what you should do in a situation like that?
No, it's one of those where that was just a perfect storm, and she happened to look so great that day because I didn't do anything. I think I was in the water next to the camera because I tend to be next to the camera, especially with a film camera, because it was how I was trained. And I stand next to the lens and look at the actors with my eyes, right? Mm. I don't sit at the monitor, especially because the monitor on a film camera is an old school, low resolution video assist. On digital cameras, I will go look at the monitor to make sure everything's right. But then once we're rolling, I don't ever stay at the monitor. I stand, if Donald Sutherland is 5 feet in front of me, why do I want to watch him on TV? That's Donald Sutherland, right?
So you're not monitor, like when you're watching takes, you're watching them just looking at the actual take, not a monitor.
Correct. I stand right next to the camera on every take. And generally I'm holding a little piece of white styrofoam. We call it a bounce board. And I'm just manipulating it to see if I want to get an extra sparkle in their eyes. Now, part of that comes from my experience of doing this forever and on all the movies, all the Bay movies, everything else. The other thing is that, my stepmother is an Academy Award nominated actress. My brother Jason is an actor. My cousin Nicolas Cage is an actor. I come from a world with a lot of actors, and I understand their insecurities as well. And I know that it gives them they feel more secure if I'm right there with them. They know that I'm really paying attention. And obviously the more comfortable the actors feel, the better they're going to be. And the bottom line is, I don't know when I'm going to get to work with Jeff Goldblum again. I want to be right next to Jeff Goldblum. I can remember, as an aside, I was doing a picture with Rob Reiner with Jack Nicholson and Morgan Freeman. And Rob Reiner said to me, why aren't you back here at the monitor? And I said, and Jack was right there in the bed. I said, because Rob, when am I ever going to get to be 5 feet away from Jack Nicholson? I can go watch it on TV when I do the DVD. I said, I want the experience of being right here. And it's just one of those things. It's one of the great privileges of my job is that I get to do that. And I don't want to miss out on that opportunity.
Are you watching playbacks or before you move to the next shot?
Yes, of course. I'll look and say, hey, how was take 4? Let me go see that. But for the first 3 or 4 takes, I'm not, and Ian Fox, my camera operator, and I have done 20 some odd movies together. He's operated on all the Jurassics. He operated on Jurassic 2 as well. So he knows Colin, he knows me. If he's not happy, he's going to be the first one to say, I need another. So, there's a lot of familiarity. We're a big family. We know each other. We've all worked together. We know what the mission is. And I know that I want to be out front. That is how I work. I don't want to be in a tent or behind a floppy flag if I can avoid it.
Yeah.
Because like you said, it's playback. I can always go back and check it, but I want to be there in the moment.
I want to talk about Biosyn and the look of that sort of white interior that I know I'm sure you were involved in some of the production design or at least collaborated with them, but can you talk to me about the way that you approached that white interior of Biosyn? And also, are the rumors true that it's taking nods from Apple Park? Is this like the evil Apple? It looks like it.
Well, there's no question that the Cupertino facility, the headquarters, is a gorgeous building, right? I mean, Johnny Ive designed it, and I don't think anybody would argue that Johnny Ive is the Raymond Loewy of our time in terms of an industrial designer, right? I mean, Raymond Loewy was the great industrial designer who designed the Coke bottle and the Toastmaster toaster and a bunch of things. Johnny Ive all you have to do is hold an Apple product, right? So they had designed that before I started the movie, but it's an obvious nod to Apple in terms of that, their design. The issue again, so the funny thing is, like a Biosyn, the sets, which were beautiful, and Colin wanted them because, look, it's a laboratory. It's going to be very clean. He wanted the lines clean. We all one of the things that's really nice, Ben, is circles and curves. Camera lenses love that, right? So all the hallways had kind of a curve radius on it. The other thing is, if you put a radius on a hallway, you tend not to see where the end of it is. So the audience's mind imagines it goes a lot farther, as opposed to just having double doors at the end.
Yeah.
It's just, and circles just frame up nicely because they become kind of elliptical. But one of the challenges, again, was we were shooting film. So again, film versus digital requires at the same, again, I'm not going to get technical. You're shooting at a 2:8:4 split, which is kind of a common interior stop. It has enough depth of field, but not too much. And it's not wide open where only someone's face is in focus and everything else turns to mush. And obviously, we're spending a lot of money on these sets, so we want to see them. Right?
Exactly.
And so the part of it is you want to carry some depth. So I think Colin kept saying to me, no, I want more depth of field. So, okay, let's shoot it. We'll shoot these interiors at a 4-5-6 split. A 4-5-6 split on a digital camera that's rated at ISO 1600 or at 800 is significantly less light than a film camera that I rate at 320. It's literally half the amount of light. And also one of the things was I knew the way we were going to shoot that, all the lighting had to be built in. It had to be what we call in the business practical lighting. You can see the light sources. But, it's 2019, 2020. Britain is still part of the EU, I believe. They haven't left yet. So incandescent light bulbs, regular light bulbs, are outlawed in Europe, right? So everything has gone LED. You can't even get them.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah. So one of the reasons why Britain wanted to leave was they were tired of Brussels telling them what they couldn't do. So now we're using LED lights, which, don't get me wrong, are a wonderful thing, but they don't have the same amount of brightness or punch. I can't replace I can go from a 75 watt bulb to a 150 watt bulb in 10 seconds. Hey, Lee, can you take the 211 out and put a 212 in? The LEDs only go to a certain wattage. So part of the concern was, okay, so let's put the brightest LED ribbon and whatever we're coming up with in, and let's pray we get there, and we did. But, the world is moving towards digital. The way productions are mounted with LED lighting is moving towards digital. I don't have an issue with that. But certainly certain sets that are lit all with LED lighting become more complex with a film camera. The big sets are easy. I'm lighting them the way I would have lit The Rock. If you'd walked up in the grid on top of the dino market set, it was a lot of light. It was very warm up there because of the heat. But it was classic old school movie lighting. But the sets where it's a laboratory where there's no place to hide a light. And also the way that Colin loves to do what cinematographers hate to do, which is to start looking in one direction and then turn and look the other.
I was going to say 360 sets.
He loves it. And he loves to do it. And because he knows that I go, oh, God, but I pull it off, he likes to do it even more. And he especially likes to do it at night, which is where it's really difficult. But so I knew that I had to prepare myself for all those inevitabilities. So with Kevin Jenkins, the production designer, who did a brilliant job, we figured out ways to kind of build the lighting in that would work for film. Because I kept saying to these guys, I understand, the concept art, but what you have to understand is this is not a car. This is not a Tesla. This is a 1963 Cadillac Eldorado that gets 7 miles to the gallon, right? I mean, we are using very old school technology that is still the most beautiful technology out there, but it requires more stuff, and everybody rose to the challenge. I mean, look, going to Canada out there in northern British Columbia with film cameras, the only issue was the cold, right? We had plenty of light, so that was great. Now we come back to London, we're building small sets and things like that. We're utilizing the resources that are available and just crossing our fingers that I don't have to hide an Inky or a Tweenie somewhere in a set, that I can let the set light itself.
Now, I know we started a little bit late today. Do you have a hard out, or can we keep you for another 5 minutes or so?
Yeah, no worries.
Awesome.
I mean, I would like to say the one set that was really cool to do was the Locust room set.
Ah, why?
Well, because what we needed to do was create the sense of shadows that would come from when the locust murmurated. Colin kept sending us all these pictures of, I think it's swallows that murmurate and how they fly around. So once they get upset and they fly around with Sam and Laura in that room, I needed to create the interactive lighting. So ultimately what we did was we hid a bunch of rock and roll, what they call movers, up above the top of the set. And then we had specific, what they call gobos, shadow patterns made up. And we went through a whole bunch of testing to figure out what would look the most like locusts the size of Air Jordans flying in front of a light source. And that came on cue. The other thing was, because the locusts change color as they get agitated, Colin wanted a color change in there as well, as the light would bounce off of their exoskeletons, which would have been reality. So it was really fun. It was a really complicated thing to kind of figure out how to do. And then once we did it, it was a case of just hitting the button, But there's a lot that goes on in a scene like that you sort of don't realize.
Yeah. Were there any practical effects in the space with them flying around to give you some realistic shadows or just something to work off of?
There was nothing flying, but certainly when they go to pull the giant bug out, that's an animatronic bug.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, they were creepy. They were the size of God rest his soul, Kobe Bryant's tennis shoe, Yeah. They were big.
It's interesting to me watching that scene, you really don't, as crazy as it is, you don't feel the CGI in that scene like you do with the dinosaur scenes. For some reason, you just accept it. I don't know, maybe it's because they're moving so fast or something, but it's so realistic looking.
I think so. But so the thing is, it would have been, I wouldn't say impossible, because nothing's impossible, but when you see the shadow patterns moving around in there, that would be a very challenging thing for a visual effects company to do, especially with actors moving through the space.
Yeah.
So the fact that I could do that gave David Vickery a background to kind of animate off of, and I felt like, God, we again, no one realizes how much work goes into things that you think are so simple. And that's the beauty of it, when no one really notices it. So that was one scene that I think we were all particularly proud of. It worked out really well. And then obviously we walked away from that set, and they basically repurposed a car wash machine that, washes cars with propane jets in it. And we mounted cameras and fireboxes for that whole sequence where Dodgson burns it.
Yeah, I wanted to talk about that because not only do you have the fire coming into the room and getting all over them, but they now, once they escape, are flying fireballs all over the place. And I wanted to learn more about the way that you affected that in the lighting. Like, you must have had something floating around to kind of give off that light.
Well, we did a bunch of things. We had these things which were called sun strips, which were basically these lights that Lee Walters, my gaffer, built that we would put into a flicker generator to create a fire effect. And then I had the effects guys setting Duraflame logs on fire and dropping them down on wires.
Literally way.
Duraflame logs.
I love when it's when it's an unusually simple fix to a problem like that.
It wasn't Duraflame because they don't have those in England, but it was the English equivalent. And they would take they'd cut the Duraflame log into pieces, and they would be up on a lift, and they would literally puppeteer them down. Oh, hey, make them drop faster. And they were like on a fishing rod, and they would, so if we had a few that were in the foreground that were interactive, David Vickery and ILM would put the rest in the background.
Oh, that's so cool.
Look, it's the simplest things. And when you've done 40 some odd movies, like I have, all of which are, or most of which are very big, you get I come in with the advantage of having worked with a lot of really great people all over the world, right? Great effects people, whether it's the John Fraser and Jim Schwam or the Corbalds here, who are probably, I think, the best that I've ever worked with. But what you do is you're always keeping your peripheral vision open going, wow, that's a great idea. I'm going to have to remember that. And sometimes I would go to them. And I think I was the one that said to them, because I think we had used Duraflame logs a lot on Pearl Harbor, for like fire stuff. And I said, hey, can we just use those, I don't know what they're made out of anymore, and they were like, oh, I think they make them out of coffee grinds here with with fire gel on them. And so essentially, there was guys fishing with flaming logs.
That's awesome. I'd love to see a picture of that. Hopefully there's something in the behind the scenes that we can see.
I'm sure there is. I mean, the reality is, so one of the big differences, Ben, and this is I'm not whinging about this, but when you do these big movies, I don't have, like somebody said, can I send you? I have no behind the scenes footage of myself. At some point, maybe Universal will send me a file with pictures of me standing next to Colin, but I don't have anything. I have storyboards, but if I sent them to you to look at, they'd say, oh, well, you broke your NDA.
Yeah.
We're now in a world in which we're both good and bad. I can't show, do I have photos on my iPhone of me on the set? Yes, but they're not, I can't distribute them, whereas back in the day of The Rock, I could have sent anybody anything. No one really, no one cared as much.
Yeah, it's certainly different now. In our last couple of minutes, I just want to bring up a question from someone in our audience. Capture Video Productions on Instagram wanted to know the lens choices that you made and if that decision relied heavily on visual effects or not. What were your lenses? How did you get to that decision?
So the lenses, ironically, were the same lenses I used on the first Jurassic World, which were a set of Primo lenses from Panavision, which was a very popular set of lenses. The Primo lenses were made out of Leica glass, but they were Panavision lenses. And then I had Dan Sasaki, the chief lens designer at Panavision, tweak them in a certain way. And they were tweaked originally because I had shot Pearl Harbor in Hawaii, and I knew that in Hawaii you have a lot of contrast. You have dark jungles and very bright clouds. And believe it or not, lens designers can change the amount of contrast that lenses have. There's a lot you can do to sort of sweeten a lens for whatever your application is. And the thing is, we loved the way those lenses look so much, sorry, Ben, that I said to Dan, I want those same sets of lenses. With respect to visual effects, the answer was no. David Vickery always said, tell the story, I'll worry about the visual effects. Now, that doesn't mean that, as the dinosaur's walking forward, we didn't boom down to make sure that he left the frame. And certainly when we had the real dinosaurs, the real animatronic dinosaurs, we used them to frame on. So yes, they did influence the lens choices, but really, the lens choices were decided by how to best tell the story.
Yeah, yeah. Well, the film is out now. Jurassic World Dominion. I mean, it has, like we said at the beginning, taking over the top spot. I mean, it's such a fun movie. It looks amazing. You guys did such an incredible job. It must feel nice to just not only have this be one of the big features that bring people back to the theater, but also just to, put a nice cap on such an incredible franchise.
It's great. Look, it's an honor to have been a part of the franchise. I've had a very blessed career, Ben, and don't think for a moment I take anything for granted. It's a privilege. It's a privilege to get to go to work and stand in the rain until 4:00 in the morning sometimes, right? I mean, there are times when you just want to go home, but then you think, oh my God, look what I'm getting to do, right? I'm getting to tell Colin to hurry up, get those actors in that helicopter because it's about to pour, and this is the last shot of the movie. It's an incredible, I've had an incredible ride. I've been very, very blessed to be as successful as I have. And I really still love the job, and I think it probably comes through in the way we chat. I really have a passion for it. I love the idea of a group of people, a village coming together to do this. It's an incredible, you build incredibly close relationships. The pandemic certainly changed the dynamic, but like I said, it didn't break it, right? People still have the same passion, and they still go to work wanting to do the best they can do. I mean, one of the things about people working in the motion picture industry is you get the best of the best, whether it's a guy who's painting scales on a Therizinosaurus, or it's the guy holding the boom pole who never seems to get in the shot, right? And you'd be a fool if you didn't stop at least once a day and look around and just admire the skill level around you and the privilege that it is to get to go to work with people like that every day.
What a great place to end. And your enthusiasm is infectious. And I really appreciate you coming back on the show. John Schwartzman, of course, we'll put a link to everything in the show notes so you guys can check it out. But we are already excited for your next appearance. So whatever your next project is, we want you back.
That's the School for Good and Evil.
There you go.
Charlize Theron. I don't know when it comes out, but I think in the fall.
Well, hopefully right around that time, you'll be back on this show. We really appreciate it, John. Thank you so much.
All righty, Ben.
I want to give a huge thank you to John Schwartzman ASC for coming back on the show to talk to us all about Jurassic World Dominion. This guy's work is amazing. He's been doing it forever, and we are so lucky to have him. So thank you, John, for coming on. We're also lucky to have Shotlister as a sponsor of Go Creative Show. We love those guys. Shotlister is the best shot listing application for production, hands down. That's it. That's what it is. And if you email them at gocreativeshow@shotlister.com, you can get a free 1-year subscription to Shotlister Pro. So please take advantage of that. I also want to encourage you to subscribe to us on YouTube, where we post our full interviews as well as show shorts that are enhanced with behind-the-scenes photos and videos. So it's a great way to experience all that is Go Creative Show. I want to thank Connor Crosby for producing the show. You can find him at ignitionvisuals.com. And of course, Dave Siegel over at Siegel Sound for mixing and mastering and making the show sound so good. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and of course, YouTube. All things Go Creative Show at gocreativeshow.com. And if you want to follow me, you can find me on Instagram at Ben Consoli. Thank you guys for joining us today, and we'll see you next week on another episode of The Go Creative Show, podcast for filmmakers.